Thank you so much for being in the webinar early. We are getting started 1 minute early. No, this is our very last webinar. How did you like the webinar? Was it good or great? Who can reply into the chat? Was it good or great? Good or great? If it's good, Olga's fired. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Guys, ready? Was it good or great? Yay! Okay. All right, everyone, it's 6:59. We're going to get started right on time. Olga, I'm so thankful that you're doing this while you are a full-time medical student. You make me proud. Thank you so much for the Kweller Prep love. Thank you for drawing the rainbows and the hearts and all the stars, okay? All right, everyone, it is 7 p.m. I'm going on mute and we're going to get started, okay? Let's go.
Hi, guys. Thank you again, as usual, for joining. Today is our grammar day. So just as a reminder and for you guys to review, on Monday, we did reading comprehension, Tuesday, we did math, and today we're finishing up with the third section of grammar. The whole time we've been working out of the same exact exam, so you guys should be pretty familiar with it. It's the DOE exam from the 2023-2024 cycle, and we're doing Form A. So the plan for today is I'm going to start with just reviewing some of the main grammar rules and patterns and talking about strategies. We'll do like an hour of notes, and then for the last hour, as usual, we'll go to that test and we'll work through all the different types of grammar questions they throw at you. So we'll do the standalones and we'll work on the passages. So that's the plan. So everybody should be on the same page. And it's 7 a.m. People are still rolling in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first kind of big umbrella rule that I want to talk about, and this rule is going to break down into several rules actually, but the pattern that I want you guys to associate this with, or the overarching theme, is consistency. So things on the grammar section must be consistent. And I'll show you what I mean as we go through the different rules. So let's label our page. So this overarching theme is going to be consistency. So I'm going to write it nice and big for us because it's really important. So when you guys think of consistency, I want you to think about things matching or things agreeing. All of those are very similar kind of overarching ideas. And in the grammar section, things have to agree. And what I mean by things is a few things. So under this umbrella, there's going to be a few rules. Rule number 1 is going to be subject-verb agreement. So basically, I'm going to go through the common ways that the test will try to trick you, the common errors that they throw into the paragraphs or passages that you guys need to get good at picking up. So very basic, you guys should all know that any sentence, most sentences, at their crux just contain a subject and a verb, someone or something that is doing some sort of action. And the subject and the verb always have to agree. So if your subject is singular, then your verb must be singular. And if your subject is plural, then your verb must be plural. So I'll show you what I mean with a very, very simple sentence, and then I'll show you kind of how the tests will trick you. Okay, so let's do what it means. So consider this simple sentence. Let's say my mother works in a school. So I want you guys to help me dissect the sentence. So in the chat, can you guys tell me what is the subject of my sentence? And also let me know if the subject is singular or if the subject is plural. Good. Good. So the answers are coming in. Perfect. So the subject is right here. I'm going to circle it. And we're just talking about one mother, right? That's what makes it singular. How would I express it if it would be plural? Mothers, right? Easy. So for most native English speakers, this is just common sense. This is how we speak, right? So to make a noun plural, we add an S. So my mother, and then what is the verb here? Good. Somebody already started putting it in the chat before I even asked. Great. So the verb is works. This is the verb. And in this sentence, everything is written correctly. So the subject and the verb agree. So nouns are tricky, the rule is a little bit tricky because when nouns are singular, they don't get an S. But when verbs are singular, oftentimes they do carry an S. It's not true for all verbs. There are certain exceptions, but that is kind of the rule. So what happens if I made this? What if I said many mothers blank in a school? In that case, the correct verb would then be work. Does that make sense? So this is how subject-verb agreement works on this test. And this is a very basic, easy sentence example. But I want to show you what they do on the exam to kind of trick you. And I also want to show you that not every verb works like this, right? So you guys should also know the singular and plural forms of very common verbs. So for example, is. She is a superstar. They, what is the plural form of is? Perfect. They are superstars. And then you can obviously change this based on tenses. So if you say she was a very bright child, they were bright children. And notice what I'm doing in those examples. I'm switching everything, right? So if I'm saying she was a bright child, and then I'm saying they were bright children. Now, this goes under the theme of consistency, right? So right now we're covering subject-verb agreement, but look what happens. She is singular, was is singular, child is singular. They is plural, were is plural, children is plural. So this is what I'm talking about when I write this nice, I'm going to put exclamation points for us here, right? Consistency is the key to the whole grammar section on this exam. Things have to match. So if your subject is singular, your verb's going to be singular, and then your future objects are usually singular as well, or your pronouns are singular as well. So everything overarchingly matches. Okay, so this is just an aside, so I'll put it aside here. Now, how will the test try to trick you? Let's talk about that. So what this test does is it causes the students to get confused between subject and object. The subject, what they do is they put a bunch of words in between the subject and the verb, and you guys lose track of what the subject is, and then you don't realize that they're actually testing you on subject-verb agreement. So let me show you an example. So I'm going to write down a sentence, and I want you guys to think about if there's an error here or not. And before you get to that, try to be systematic. So tell me what the subject is and what the verb is and whether each one of those is singular or plural. Okay, so here's our example. So I'm going to write it down and then I'll read it out loud for you guys. Okay, so super long, but this is what they do to you on the exam, right? They give you a nice long section and it's your job to dissect it. So I'm going to read this out loud for us. So it says, the collection of short stories, many of them written by authors in 19th century England, including Jane Austen and C.S. Lewis, contain some of the preeminent works of fiction to date. So guys, take a second, read the sentence, digest it, tell me what the subject is, tell me what the verb is to that subject, tell me if they agree and if you think that this has a mistake or not. Sorry, guys, it's just lagging. Okay, so I got some people who got the right answer, and I got a lot of people that are confused about what the subject is. So let me try to teach you guys some of the tricks. So first of all, whenever you guys have a phrase that is surrounded by these dashes, like this one here, and sometimes it won't be dashes. Sometimes it could be equivalent if they, and I'll put this in red, if they just surround a phrase by commas. That phrase is an extra phrase, right? So all of this is extra information that's just describing our subject. So all of this is just describing the noun before. All of this is describing the short stories. None of that is necessary to the sentence. And the way that you can prove it to yourself is you can cross all of this stuff out and you can see that the sentence still makes sense. The collection of short stories contains some of the preeminent works of fiction to date. So number one thing that I always recommend to students is if that part's not underlined and it's surrounded either by commas or by dashes, you're able to eliminate it. So pretend that you literally just pick it up and throw it away. And now we can focus on the crux of the sentence. And now I see more right answers coming in because as soon as I took out all these extra words, you guys can visualize the subject much clearer. The next thing that I'm going to tell you is that prepositional phrases are also extra. So this preposition of and this whole prepositional phrase of short stories is doing the same thing. It's just descriptive. So it's just describing the collection. So again, we can remove this. And all of this helps us realize what I'm trying to get to, which is that our subject is the collection. That's the goal for you guys to realize ultimately that your subject is the collection. And then the next question for you guys to ask yourself is this singular or plural? And in this case, it's singular. One collection. And then here's our verb, contain. And then you can follow the rule that if the subject is singular, then your verb should carry an S at the end. And the sentence ended up having a mistake. And it's a subject-verb agreement question. Okay. Anybody have any questions based on this? So let's jot down everything because collection is singular. So the collection contains the same way the mother works. It's the same exact example as this, but I always love teaching you guys whenever you're stuck with a very complicated example, go back to the basics. So you guys can all write out a very simple sentence for yourself, like mine. Then you can extrapolate the rule, even if you don't know the rule off the top of your head, and then you can apply the rule to this more complicated case. Now, with subject-verb agreement, there's a few things that I want you guys to have in your notes that I want you guys to know. So one thing for you guys to know is that anytime they use each makes everything singular. So each is singular. So for example, each of the boys is athletic. So without the each, you would just say boys are athletic. But when you put the word each in there, you're talking about each individual boy, which is why your verb is singular. Another example, just for you guys to have, is each of the teachers tests, or sorry, each teacher tests the same material. Okay, the next thing that you guys should know in terms of subject-verb agreements is gerunds, which is just a fancy way of saying words that end in ing are singular. So for example, we can say running is my favorite sport. The next way that they sometimes trick you is with collective nouns, and that's also what I did with the very first long example that I showed you on the previous page. So these are nouns that include words like the government, New York City, town council, or collection, which we saw in the previous example. So sometimes students get confused and they think that since the government is made up of many people, it counts as a plural noun, or since New York City is made up of multiple municipalities and etc., or town council has many people, or the collection can have many short stories, but each one of those nouns themselves are singular. And the way that you can always check is, can I make this plural? So one collection versus many collections. One government, many governments. One city, multiple cities. One town council, multiple town councils. So if you can turn it into plural, then by default, that means it's singular. So don't allow yourself to get confused with collective nouns because the test will use them and they expect you to know that they're singular. So for example, the town council votes on the matter today. And then finally, the last tip that I'll give you guys in terms of this is that neither nor is also singular. So for example, neither the city nor its constituency has an answer to the problem. Versus both the city and its constituency have an answer to this problem. So notice the difference in these examples, right? So when you use neither nor, those are singular. Those by default means neither this one thing nor this one other thing singularly has an answer, right? So neither the city nor has, which is singular, versus when you use both, you're implying that it's plural. So whenever you see the word both, this implies plurality, which means that your verb has to be plural, which it is in this case. So these are kind of the main ways the test will go about tricking you. So that's what I want to get you guys to focus on. And these are kind of the strategies of like the trick questions that they can ask you, okay? And this is all subject-verb agreement stuff. So if we just make a page for tips and strategies, these are things that I've said verbally, but I just want to make sure that we're clear. So you see me doing this all the time. Underline the subject and the verb. Draw arrows to connect them. And then determine if they agree. So ask yourself, is this singular? Is this plural? And determine if they agree. To help yourselves, don't be afraid to cross out any prepositional phrases or parenthetical clauses. That separate the subject from the verb. The main thing is focus only on the essentials. So this is basically a summary of everything that we just talked about. Sure, people are asking to go back to this page. So I'll go back for a second, and then we'll move on to the next, which is, I want to talk about verbs. And this is still under the context of consistency. And instead of the subject and the verb having to agree, this next thing is going to be all about verbs carrying the same tense. So it's still about consistency, but they just have to carry the same tense. Okay, so let's call this rule number 2. And this is going to be verb tenses. So again, the crux of this is that all verbs in the sentence must carry the same tense, or the tense of the verb must remain consistent. And again, the key here is the consistent part. That's really what I want to highlight with all of these examples. So I think sometimes students get confused between the different verb tenses, and it's not important for you guys to be able to tell me if something is like simple future or future progressive or present perfect or something like that. The exact words of those are irrelevant to this exam, and they are not important for me right now teaching you. What's more important is that you guys must understand that they must stay consistent. So what that means is you can't be using verbs in present tense and then switching to past tense in one sentence. So if you're using multiple verbs in one sentence, they must all stay in the same tense. So similarly to how I teach you guys to figure out what the subject is of the sentence and figure out what the verb is of the sentence, and then underline each of them, draw an arrow, and then tell me if they agree. The idea is the same when the test is asking you about verbs. You figure out all the verbs in your sentence, you underline them, you circle them, however you want to annotate them and highlight them to yourself. And then you ask yourself, do these verbs match? Are they in the same tense, or am I flip-flopping? Remember, the big umbrella, the way that I opened today's webinar, is consistency. So everything has to be consistent. Tenses have to be consistent. Plurality has to be consistent. Subject verb has to be consistent. You'll see later, I'll show you guys that subjects and pronouns have to stay consistent. So it's the same idea applied to all of these different faculties that they might test you on. So let's review basics of tenses. So the main ones that I want you guys to think about is obviously present, past, and future. And I divide each one of these into 3. So for present, we can have simple present. We can have present progressive or continuous. And again, don't focus on these words. They don't matter. Think about more of the examples. And then we can have present perfect. And then we'll have past, and it's those same exact 3 categories. We can have simple. We can have past progressive / continuous. And then we can have past perfect. And then finally, we can have future. And same idea, we can have simple. We can have future progressive. And then we can have future perfect. Okay, so let's learn by examples. It's my favorite way of learning and teaching. So simple present. So present means something is happening right now, right? Right now. So for example, we can say the team runs every day. So this form, this is our verb, right? Runs. This form of the verb tells me that it's simple present, that it's happening in the present tense. Literally at this very moment. So that can be something like the team is running right now. And then what does present perfect mean? We can say the team has run every day for the past month. So you'll notice patterns, right? So a lot of times students ask me, with these grammar questions and with tenses, what do the has and the have mean? So you guys will notice the pattern that whenever we have has and then a verb, that's simply the perfect tense. The verb after it is what tells you if it's past, present, or future. Does that make sense? So you'll see this more when we finish the other 2 examples. So let's get through this and then we'll compare. So what do we do for past? We're going to stick to the same example.
Jessica, how did it come? Jacob.
Okay, sorry about that. So we're going to stick to the same example. So we can say the team ran yesterday. The team was running yesterday. And then finally, the team had run. So when we do past tense, the verb itself changes. So watch the verb change from run to ran, right? That tells me that I'm in the past. When we do past progressive, the running stays the same, but the word before it changes, right? So instead of is running, now we have was running. So the continuous, the infinitive form changes. And then finally, the last one, instead of has run, had run. Again, the word before it changes, and that's what signifies the tense for us. And usually, I will say that in this past perfect tense, whenever we use had run, it's usually also to tell us about chronology. So sometimes you'll have 2 verbs in one sentence. So the team had run before the storm rolled in. So we have 2 verbs, right? We have run, and then we also have rolled in. So basically what they're saying is the verb that's attached to the had, that's what happened first. So first the team ran and then the storm rolled in. Does that make sense? So the perfect tense is also for chronology. The progressive continuous form is always in, correct, it's always in as a gerund, yeah, in that ing form. That's what makes it continuous, right? Running, talking, it's implying that it's continually happening. And then finally, for these last examples, we can say the team will run tomorrow. We can say the team will be running tomorrow. And then finally, the team will have run by tomorrow. So this is kind of the basics of the verb tenses. I don't want to spend too much time on this because, again, it's not important for me that you guys know these. It's just important for me that you understand that sometimes students will see is running and they think that that means that it's future tense, but it's not about that. I want you to categorize these categories in terms of what is present, what is past, and what is future, and that those don't necessarily look like the simple cases and on all the times. That's what I want you guys to kind of get out of this. Okay, so let's think about what else has to agree. So the third rule that goes under this umbrella is pronouns. So this we'll call antecedent pronoun agreement. So let me show you guys what it means. So when the players arrived at the gym, they began to practice for hours. Okay, what is a pronoun here? Good, so the pronoun here is they. And what or who is they referring to? Good, the players. So when we talk about agreement, it's again about plurality. So you'll notice that the players, there are multiple, right? So this is plural, which is why we opted to use they, which is a plural pronoun. So the same way that we learned for subjects and for verbs and that things have to match, the same is true for the pronoun and antecedent. And antecedent is just a fancy word that it means the noun that the pronoun replaces. So let's make a table for ourselves for you guys to know which pronouns are singular and which pronouns are plural. So we can have people or we can have things. So what are some singular pronouns that we use for people? Yeah, good. Good, he or she. And then for things, it. Good. And then the plural form of that is they. And for things, it's still they. Now, a different part of this is that we can also have possessive pronouns. So let's talk a little bit about those. So what are the possessive pronouns that we use for people? that are singular. Yeah, so we can say his or her. And then for people, if we're talking about plural, we can say their. And then for things that's possessive, we can say its. And for plural, it's still there. Now with it's not its with an apostrophe, right? So no apostrophe. So I'm going to put that in red for us. So when we have an apostrophe, this is a conjunction of it is. And when we have no apostrophe, that's possessive. So let's do 2 examples with that. So let's say when the university opened blank doors in the early 20th century, only 1,000 students were enrolled. And the second example is going to be when you spend time at the beach, blank imperative to wear sunscreen. So in both of these cases, the word that's missing is its. I want you guys to tell me which its goes in each one, for A and for B. Which its goes where? Okay, excellent. So this one is its doors. No apostrophe, meaning possessive. And you can ask yourself whose doors, and it's the university's doors, right? And university is singular, which is why we're using a singular possessive pronoun to replace it. Another option that they might have for you is when the university opened their doors. And that might sound right, but make sure that it's not. Make sure you don't pick that option, because you're going to underline the university, you're going to underline its, you're going to draw an arrow for yourself, and you're going to say university is singular, its is the singular possessive pronoun, so that's correct. And I'm picking possessive, not the conjunction, because if I say the university opened its doors in the early 20th century, we can all agree that doesn't make sense. Versus in the second one, it's when you spend time at the grocery store, it is imperative to wear sunscreen. In that case, it is obvious here, which is why we use the conjunction form, which is why we need an apostrophe. Okay, any questions on this stuff? It's versus its, and is very common to come up on the test, and so is this agreement question. Okay, so I'll stay on this page for just a few seconds longer, but again, remember, you guys don't have to worry too much about the notes because we're always going to send them out. The last thing that I want to talk about in terms of pronouns is something called pronoun clarity. So this is another thing that is commonly tested on the exam. Okay, let's do pronoun clarity, and then we'll switch gears to commas. So pronoun clarity is when they give you ambiguous pronouns and multiples of them, and then you have to decide kind of, I'll show you guys by examples. So they'll ask you how to best fix the sentence. So example, Joshua wanted to give Rob his computer later that day, but he was out of town. So what do you guys think is wrong with this sentence? Or is there something wrong with the sentence? And what's wrong with it? How would you fix it? Yeah, so somebody is saying vague. The pronoun is vague, right? So we don't know whose computer, right? So is it Joshua's computer? Is it Rob's computer? And then we also don't know who was out of town. Was Josh out of town or was Rob out of town? So we don't know who his and he refer. So we do not know to whom his and he refer. That's the problem with the sentence. So when they ask you to correct a sentence like this, the answer is to replace the pronouns with the nouns. So sometimes when I teach this to my private students, it sounds repetitive to them, right? So they say, it sounds like too much, because we could say Joshua wanted to give Rob Joshua's computer later that day, but Rob was out of town. So it sounds a little bit repetitive because we're saying the names multiple times, but don't fear, that's how you fix it. Even if it sounds a bit awkward, it's more precise, and it takes care of this error that they're testing, which is pronoun clarity. So again, just to be perfectly clear, I'm going to rewrite it in the correct version. So I'm going to put up here fixed. And the way that we would fix it is we would say Joshua wanted to give Rob Joshua's computer, but Rob was out of town. Okay, so that's kind of a lot with undergoing consistency. There's more, right? There's noun agreement, there's subject-object agreement. So this kinds of questions go on and on, but I think this gives you an overarching theme of consistency and is enough for you guys to get the majority of the questions correct. So I want to switch gears a little bit to talking about commas and conjunctions, because that's the other big part of the test, right? They test consistency and then they test structure, how you learn how to put different things together. So that's the other big thing that I want to cover with you guys before we get to practice. So now I'm going to put 2 and I'm going to put structure in big letters. And I want to start with talking about commas. So it's going to be commas and semicolons. Yeah, just commas and semicolons. Okay, so first, let's just brainstorm together. What are all the different ways that you guys know to properly use a comma? Yeah, so the big ones is for a list. We can also use it for a date or for like a location, like an address. Absolutely when we combine sentences, so combining sentences. And we'll talk about that when we use fanboys or conjunctions. Good, separates 2 clauses. So that's important. So like those parenthetical clauses, if you remember from that very first example that I gave you with the collection of stories. So we can use a comma for those parenthetical clauses. And that's usually when we have 2 commas and some phrase in the middle. So I'll draw this little figure for you guys to remember. Sure, when signing a letter, I'm not going to put that on our list because you're probably not going to see that on the exam. This is another big one, combining sentences, but instead of fanboys, we use dependent and independent clauses. So you'll use dependent, comma, independent. The first one says list. And absolutely, when we have a modifier, that's pretty close to parenthetical clauses, but technically different. So I'll put that on our list. Okay, so this is a pretty good list of everything that commas are used for. Now, the main thing that I see them testing on this exam is lists. That will come up, and this stuff, combining sentences. So I'm going to put stars next to those because those are the most common ways they test you guys on commas. Okay, so let's talk about how we combine sentences. Okay, so let's talk about a simple example. So let's say we say the desert is hot in the day. It is cold at night. So here's my sentence. Is this okay? What do we call this error? Yeah, it's a run-on or comma splice, right? So we can call this a comma splice or a run-on. This is the most common mistake on the exam. This is big no-no. Big no-no. Basics, you guys should all know that you cannot combine two independent thoughts with just a comma. So I'm going to write it big and red. So you cannot combine two independent thoughts with just a comma or with only a comma. So we absolutely can't do that. Okay, so give me a way to fix it. How can I combine it? Good, so we can use a conjunction, so a fanboy. Good. So which fanboy would you guys use in this case? Good. So I agree. I think but is the best one here. You could also use and, but the key with conjunctions is it depends what you want to do, right? So here I see a little bit of contrast, right? So we're mentioning that in the day it's hot and at night it's cold. So I see opposing ideas. So as an author, it would probably be best for me to use but here to highlight that contrast, to highlight the fact that something's changing. So that's one way that we can fix it. So let's write that down. And while I write that down, you guys brainstorm a different way that you can fix it. Good, somebody put it. Somebody said semicolon. So do I have to put anything with a semicolon? Like, do I need to add a conjunction? No, right. That's the beauty of semicolons. They kind of act as a period, but you don't need a capital letter. So you can separate two independent thoughts with just a semicolon. That's completely allowed. So we can say the desert is hot in the day, semicolon, it's cold at night. And notice my conjunction form of it's, right? What we just reviewed. So the point of a semicolon is for sentence variety, right? So if you don't want to have lots of short, choppy sentences, you can combine some of them with just semicolons. So instead of saying the desert is hot in the day, period, it's cold at night, you can say the desert is hot in the day, semicolon, it's cold at night, and vary your sentence structure. As an author, that's the point of using it. In a poem, there may be other points of using it. it like requires a pause similar to a comma, but not as much of a pause and a new beginning the way like a period in a new sentence, a new capital letter requires. Okay, so we went over 2 ways of combining it. Now, the third way, somebody already put in the chat, you can make one clause dependent. So usually the way that we do this is we use words that are not conjunctions, but words such as like although or since, and we start the first sentence with that, and that makes the first part of the clause dependent. So for example, we can say, although the desert is hot in the day, it is cold at night. And notice what happens. So basically what happens is I made this dependent. So I made this dependent. And the way that you can prove to yourself that it's dependent is that can no longer stand by itself. So I can't just say, although the desert is hot in the day. That does not stand by itself as a full sentence. It's begging the question, what? Does that make sense? So what those kinds of conjunctions are called are subordinating. So we have the fanboys, which are coordinating conjunctions. So if I make a little table, we have coordinating conjunctions. And then we have subordinating conjunctions. And we use these to make clauses dependent. Used to make clauses dependent. So whenever you guys see a sentence that's going to open with one of these words that I'm going to list for you guys, you automatically know that it is dependent and you expect there to be a comma after. So that's the strategy here of learning these words. So whenever you see a sentence start with before or after or because, this one is very common. So I'm going to put a star next to it. Since, although, while. So all of these are used to make a question. If when a sentence begins with a subordinating conjunction and the dependent clause comes first, it requires a comma. And then the coordinating conjunctions, these are used just with a comma to join words. So that's like this example here. So fanboys are coordinating. And for those that don't know what fanboys are, that's just a mnemonic or a memory tool to remember these words. So this fanboys stands for and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Okay, do you guys have any questions on this kind of stuff or how to combine sentences? We can do some more examples if you guys need. No, you guys are good? Okay, cool. So there's just 2 more things that I want to cover before we get to practicing. So one thing that I want to cover with you guys are transition words. So that is honestly going to help you guys with reading comprehension as well, but it's especially useful for the grammar passages. So I want you guys to know which words go with which transition, like what words are signifying different things in terms of reading. So let's call this transition words. Okay, so we can have transition words for various things. So we can have transition words to signify an agreement. We can have transition words to signify an example. We can have transition words to signify contrast, cause and effect, so on and so forth. There are many sort of specific transition words, but for the grammar portion of the test, I want to go through 4 kind of big categories, and you guys can help me list out all the different transition words that you know for those categories. So we're going to make this table and divide it into 4. And this one here is going to be all about words that signify agreement. This one is going to be words that signify example. This is going to be for contrast / comparison. So contrast means different, and then comparison means similar, just for you guys to know, but we're going to group them together. And then finally, the last one is going to be for cause and effect. So one by one, you guys can start spamming the chat. So what kind of transition words are you aware of that signify agreement? And what does agreement really mean? So this means like agreeing with a statement or continuing a thought. Good. So you guys are saying adding on, in addition. Good. So we can say in addition, additionally, furthermore, that's a good one. Another one is moreover, which is almost identical to furthermore. You can also have also, good, as well. And then the basic one, just and, plus, good. So someone's asking about thus. Thus is more like cause and effect. So I would put thus in this category. So since we got there, let's do cause and effect. So when we say about cause and effect, what that means is there's some causality, or something happened because of something else. So yeah, good. You guys already said thus. We can also have so, as a result, consequently, since, therefore, because of, good. Hence is another one. Okay, so now let's do example. So example is common sense, right? To give an example to support what was previously mentioned. Good, good. So you guys are great. You're spamming. So we can say, for example, and say, for instance, to illustrate. Yep, to further explain. Excellent, guys. I can't even keep up with you. Such as is another one that's really big. Usually the comma will go before such as. Yep, you can say to demonstrate as well. Okay, guys, last one. How about let's split this into contrast and comparison. So which contrast words do you guys know? Good. However, but, on the other hand, good. Sometimes they literally will say in contrast, so I'm going to put that in our list, or in comparison. On the contrary, yep. And then how about for comparison, similar words? So the basic one is similarly. We can also use likewise. Sometimes I see them say like in a similar manner or fashion. We can also see like on the same note. Okay, excellent, guys. So this is a good list and table for you guys to review a few days before the test or every day. Again, similar to the math things, just writing these words in their same boxes will organize them for or organize these words properly for yourselves in your brain. So that way, whenever you see in addition or whenever you see as a result, you know exactly which category it goes to in your brain. And what that does is when you look at the answer choices, you're subconsciously going to be leaning to the one that has something to do with cause and effect when you notice one of those transition words. Or you're going to be subconsciously leaning to something that has to do with giving an example. Oftentimes, both in reading comprehension and grammar, they'll ask you for a detail or for an example. And these cue words, these key transition words can point to where you need to go back to in the passage to pick that out from. Okay, the very last thing that I want to talk about before we get to practice is this idea of precision on the grammar exam. So oftentimes, I know that you guys have seen these questions if you've practiced. They'll ask you which of the following is the most precise wording or the precise answer choice. So what do they mean by that? This means that you have to be as specific as possible and as brief as possible. So let's write that down. Be as specific as possible, but at the same time, you have to be as brief as possible. So you want to be specific in the least amount of words. So don't go for a wordy choice for these questions. So these are rules to live by for these questions. I'm going to put 2 exclamation points next to each one of them. So in other words, what I'm telling you guys to do is to pick the answer choice that uses the most exact language in the fewest amount of words. So on this note, which words are you going to avoid? You're going to avoid very weak verbs and nouns. So you're going to avoid things like thing. You're going to avoid good. You're going to avoid people, place, a lot. So why are you going to avoid these things? Because none of them are specific. So instead of place, you're going to pick the choice that tells you which place, right? Instead of people, you want the choice which people. Instead of a lot or a few, you want to know how many. So pick the answer choice that has very specific things like locations, things like names of people, words like frequency, numbers. Look for adjectives and avoid the weak verbs and nouns for these types of precision questions. Okay, so we did a really big overview of a bunch of grammar-related strategies and rules. So I'm going to go ahead and check this part off of our list. And now we're about halfway done and we're ready to move to the practice exam grammar section. Okay, so because this is the halfway point, I'll let you guys get up for a second, stretch, take a deep breath. and then open up that
Oh,
same,
no break. Okay, fine. Who wants to take a break to see my cutie little baby?
just 30
Jacob,
seconds.
you want to say hi to everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go say hi to everybody. Okay, everyone, you get like a 1-minute break. Ready? Are you ready, guys? Jacob, come say hi. Say hi, everyone.
Yeah, I want
Hi, everybody. Say hi, everybody. Say, I'm Jacob.
I Jacob.
Jacob. All right, break's over, everyone. No? Are we doing break? Is break over? That's enough break for you. Say bye. Say break's over, Jacob.
But I Jacob.
Say break's over. Say break over now.
But I now.
Yeah. Okay, guys, break's over, guys. Done. I'm risking my life. All right, Olga, break's over. Goldie, come. Come, Goldie. You want to tell them there's a break? Come, Goldie. Who wants to see a cute little dog? That's another part of your break. Ready? Hold on, Jacob. That's it. You're not the spotlight. Look, it's your dog. Hold on. Wait. Let everyone see Goldie. Hold on. Oi. Goldie. Yay. Who's cuter, the baby or Goldie? The toddler or Goldie? Goldie.
I do.
Ready? Who can vote? Jacob? Jacob? All right, that's it. Olga. Break over, everyone. Jacob, say break over.
Break over, Alvin.
Okay, bye, guys. That's it. Break's over. I'm going back on mute. Ready? Say bye, Goldie.
Hi, Goldie.
Bye, Goldie.
Bye, Goldie.
Okay, that's it, guys. Break's over. There. All right, Olga, back to the grinds.
See, I was planning 30 seconds of a deep breath, but you guys got a full 2 minutes. So we should be invigorated and ready to keep going. So again, we're working now out of Form A, the test that we've been covering the last few days, okay? So there's going to be 4 just in this test, 4, but on your test there might be 5. The amount of grammar questions sometimes shifts. So there's a range of grammar questions that you guys could have on the test. So sometimes it's plus or minus a few. But let's go ahead and get started with these standalone questions. So this question just says, which edit should be made in the sentence? So we don't know, but we know there's a mistake somewhere in the sentence, right? And looking at the answer choices, all the choices are about a comma. So right away, my brain is going towards all the ways that I learned how to use commas, which we just reviewed in our overview, right? So automatically, the way that you guys should be thinking about these questions is, what are they testing, right? What are they trying to get in this question? What are they testing me on? And in this case, they're testing you on commas. So once we establish that, we can go and read the sentence. So we have on May 8th, 2018. Okay, so this first comma, we said is okay, right, for dates. And then the second comma is okay because this is a prepositional phrase. And it's necessary to set off this prepositional phrase, to set off this date from the rest of the sentence. So far, I know it's not this. So we say, on May 8th, 2018, Boston University student Zach Prescott ran a mile in 4 minutes and 32 seconds while juggling 3 lacrosse balls, breaking the 32-year-old world record in joggling, a sport that combines jogging and juggling. Okay. So let's dissect this further. So this one says include a comma after student. So this could be okay, but that would only be okay if we also had a comma here. Because in that case, we would be breaking up this phrase, saying that this phrase is just describing student and saying that we could remove this, right? But just putting 1 comma would make that an unbalanced phrase. So we cannot just put 1 comma here. If it said insert a comma after student and after Prescott, then it could be choice B. Does that make sense? But the way that it's written by itself, that comma would be unnecessary. We would just be unnecessarily separating the subject from the adjective phrase. Okay, so no good. So next, delete the comma after lacrosse balls. Again, we cannot delete this comma because everything after here, this place, breaking a world record, blah, 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 this is another phrase, right? The way I know it's a phrase, as usual, the way I showed you guys with the examples previously, is I can remove this whole thing and the sentence would still make sense. On May 8th, 2018, Boston University student Zach Prescott ran a mile in 4 minutes and 43 seconds while juggling 3 lacrosse balls, right? That's an independent thought that stands by itself. We don't need this phrase at the end. But because we're adding in this participle phrase at the end, this comma needs to stay there. So that means it can't be C. And we're left with our final and correct answer, which is D. Insert a comma after joggling. And again, the reason we would insert that comma is because this phrase is just another phrase. It's one that we call an appositive phrase. And again, I don't want you guys to get bogged down by these details. It doesn't matter if you know that it's called an appositive phrase or an adjective phrase or whatever you want to call it, but you should realize that this just describes joggling. So it's not necessary to the sentence. It's an extra phrase that's describing the noun. It's modifying the noun, and it requires a separation because it's non-essential. And like always, whenever we have non-essential phrases, we're able to delete them and the sentence should still make sense. So this one was testing us on commas and also on phrases. Any questions on this one? Okay, good. So let's keep going. So number 2. So let's see. This is asking us how the paragraph should be revised. So Danielle spent, so whenever they are underlining a verb, you guys should always start thinking about tenses, right? And this is another thing that we talked about. So you should automatically be thinking, is this asking me about tenses? Are the tenses matching? Are they consistent? So Danielle spent several hours preparing for an upcoming audition for a play at the community theater. So far, so good. Spent several hours. This seems like it's in past tense. And there doesn't seem to be anything that is, it's in simple past tense, and it's correct in this case because it's describing actions that are, we have to see how the rest of the paragraph played out, but so far it seems like it's okay. Okay, so Danielle spent several hours preparing for an upcoming audition for a play at the community theater. First, she did vocal exercises. So again, we have another verb, and the verb is still in simple past tense. She did vocal exercises to practice her diction and projection so that her words would carry clearly throughout the large auditorium. Then she studies. So now all of a sudden we have present tense. So I notice that my pattern is breaking, right? So I have past tense and then I have past tense, and all of a sudden I have present tense. And if we skip to the last sentence, she recited, okay, that's past tense again. So I know that studies is the problem. So right away, I'm drawn to this being the mistake. Right away, I'm thinking G. But now let's see about this comma part, just to make sure to us. So then she studies the text of the monologue to better understand the emotions and motivations of the character she plans to portray. So here we just have 2 things, emotions and motivations. That's not a list, so we don't need a comma here. You only call it a list if it's more than 2. If you have 3, that's when you start using a comma, but just 2 things is not a list. So you don't need a comma between them with using the word and. So we just confirmed that our answer is C, and this is testing us on tenses. Okay, this one was pretty simple. Any questions? Okay, let's keep going. So this is asking us how this sentence should be revised. So to promote their club, a bake sale will be sponsored by members of the debate team on Wednesday. Okay, so this question is testing us on, it's a modifier problem, right? So it starts with to promote their club. and then the noun directly after that is a bake sale. So does that make sense? Can a bake sale promote their club? What do you guys think? No, right? That doesn't make sense. A bake sale cannot promote their club. So whenever you have a modifying phrase like that, so you have a modifying phrase, so to promote their club or whatever the phrase is, directly after it, the noun must be what's being modified. So a bake sale cannot promote the club. That doesn't make any sense. People promote their club. So we have to look for an answer choice where directly after the modifier, we have a noun that consists of people, because that makes sense for people to be promoting the club. So it can't be this, and it can't be this, and it can't be this. So the answer is C. So to promote their club, members of the debate team will sponsor a bake sale. So now it makes sense because members are the ones that are going to be promoting their club. So again, whenever we have a modifying phrase, the noun directly after it has to be what is being modified. Is that clear? Okay, so let me give you guys another example because this is something that we didn't practice before. So is this sentence okay? Or is there a mistake? And if there's a mistake, how would you guys fix it? Yeah, good, right? So here, what is my modifier? My modifier is cooking dinner. So the noun directly after it has to be the one that's doing the modifier or the one that's modifying. So in this case, it doesn't make sense. The class can't be cooking dinner. So I have to replace Olga in the class. So to fix this sentence, I would say cooking dinner, Olga forgot the class, or Olga forgot her class. And this also brings me to another point, which is about using active versus passive voice. And that's actually seen in this sentence too. So instead of saying will be sponsored, here we're directly saying will sponsor. So this is using passive voice. And this is using active voice, right? So this is active voice. So for this test, and honestly, for being a good writer in general, you guys should always stick to active voice. So what that means is the noun that's doing the action should be doing the action. You shouldn't flip the noun and the object, basically, the subject and the object. So in this sentence, what is the subject? The one that I'm zooming in on right now. Good, right? So this is the subject. I'm the subject, Olga. And then the other nouns in the sentence are called objects. So the class here is the object. It's kind of like the subject is the one that's doing the action, and then the object is the one that's receiving the action. So Olga is doing the forgetting, and the class is kind of receiving the forgetting. So the way that you know you're using active voice is usually the subject must come before the object. and the subject must come before the verb, and then the object comes after the verb. So whenever we flip those, we usually are using passive voice instead of active voice, and that's a general no-no. So you guys always want to stay in the active voice in your own writing, and especially on this exam, on any answer choice that you pick, the correct choice would be the one that's written and worded in active voice. Okay, is that clear to anybody? Does anybody have questions about this modifier question or about active versus passive voice? No. Okay, excellent. So let's keep going. So we're up to our last standalone question. So let's zoom in on it and let's start reading it together. So this is specifically asking us about the mistake in sentence structure. So when we talk about sentence structure, we're talking about how sentences are, like how they come together, right? So how sentences are combined. So that's what they're testing on. They're testing us on here. So they're testing us on how sentences are combined. Okay, so that's what I'm keeping in mind while I'm reading. So in September 2016, the National Museum of African American History and Culture opened as part of the Smithsonian Institution. The museum is already the Smithsonian's third most popular site. Okay, so what do we think about choice A? What do we think about that? Is everything before the comma independent? Can it stand by itself? Yeah, right? And everything after the comma, that's also independent. And what did we learn is the biggest no-no of combining sentences? What kind of mistake is this? Comma splice, exactly. So let's write out the steps of what we're going to do. So number one, whenever they're testing you on sentence structure, and you see a comma, follow these steps. So number one, is everything before the comma independent? Number two, is everything after the comma independent? Number three, is there a conjunction, fanboy, after the comma? So these are the questions that you need to ask yourself, right? So if in this case, the answer here is yes, the answer here is yes, and the answer here is no. If this is your answer, then that means that you're dealing with a run-on, or you're dealing with a comma splice, whatever you want to call it. And that is very commonly asked. They ask this on almost every single exam. So there's zero chance that you guys are getting a question like this wrong, because this is the biggest no-no. So after you figure this out, then you think, okay, well, how do I fix a run-on? And this is something that we already learned today. So quickly tell me the 3 ways to fix a run-on. Three ways. 1 is semicolon, 2 is fanboys. What's the 3rd way? Yes. So 1 is semicolon, 2 is comma and fanboy, and 3 is make one clause dependent. Okay, good. Excellent, guys. So what's the answer in this case? Excellent. E. Good. Okay, great, guys. So we got through all of the standalone questions. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the passages. So again, this is sort of a truncated grammar section. Usually there's like 5 standalones, and usually there's at least 2 passages. Because this is just a practice, it's truncated. So there are just 1 passage and 4 standalone questions. But let's go ahead and tackle the passage. Okay, so usually with these passages, I don't really read them in depth because this isn't the reading comprehension section, right? So my goal is not really to understand what this passage is really talking about. My goal is more to understand how the passage is structured. And usually in my experience for these grammar passages, they're almost always, I think they always are in my experience, but I never like saying 100% because I never know what the DOE is really going to do. But in my experience, they're always nonfiction, or not so much nonfiction, but they're like structured. So it's never going to be like an excerpt from some novel, because it's not a reading comprehension test. It's more for you guys to understand how the paragraphs are structured together, what the different transition words are, how it's like how the topic sentences relate to the details. The most they'll ask you is like a very basic main idea type of question. But again, in relevance to the grammar of it. So with these passages, usually what I do is I'll just read the title. So it says the benefits of indoor plants. And then I kind of jump to the questions and I go through the questions and I use the questions to read the passage. So that way I'm not reading the passage multiple times. So I'll show you guys what I mean. So this says, which sentence should follow sentence 3 to best introduce the topic of the passage? No, it is very unlikely that they'll give you a poem on the grammar section. There will be a poem usually on the reading section. Okay, so which sentence should follow sentence 3 to best introduce the topic of the passage? So this is a question that I would save for last. Because I'm not reading the full passage, I'm not sure what the topic really is right now. So after I go through all of these questions, I'll go back to 5 because at that point I'll gotten through most of the passage. The next one is asking which transition word should be added to the beginning of sentence 5. So this is exactly why we went through the transition words, right? So we have to figure out what is the connection between sentence 4 and sentence 5. How are they connected? And once we understand their relationship, then we'll be able to pick the appropriate word. So now I'm going to go back into the passage and read up until sentence 5, because that's what I kind of have to read to get to the answer of my question. So in an age of endless media content, it is easy to see why people might prefer to stay inside. According to a study sponsored by the Environmental Protection Agency, Americans spend an average of 87% of their time indoors. Scientists say the separation between people and nature puts people at risk for physical and psychological issues. Okay, so remember during the reading comprehension test, I was teaching you guys to read with connotation, right? To read and think about whether words are positive or negative. So when I'm seeing like at risk, I'm seeing like negatives, right? So basically they're telling me in the first paragraph some negatives of staying indoors, right? They're talking about indoor time, staying inside, indoors, that's the theme that keeps repeating. And we notice that there's some negatives to this. But notice that the title is positive, right? The benefits of indoor plants. So I'm already kind of putting together the pieces that they're setting me up for. Here is why staying indoor may be bad. And here's a solution, indoor plants. So I'm getting all that just by kind of reading the first paragraph in the title and noticing how the author is setting up this argument. So during the process of photosynthesis, plants convert carbon dioxide into oxygen and remove many harmful toxins from the air. Spending prolonged periods of time indoors away from plants deprives people of these benefits. So the way that I teach you guys about transition words, another really important sort of key for these passages is pronouns, because when they say these benefits, you guys should ask yourselves, what benefits? And the benefits are from the previous sentence, the fact that they remove the harmful toxins from the air. So now I need to think about what is the relationship between sentences 4 and sentences 5. So sentence 4 is saying something positive that happens with plants. And then sentence 5 is saying, well, when people are indoors, they don't get that positive. So the relationship is a shift. And it's a shift from something good to, unfortunately, even though plants are helpful outside, they don't get to, people that stay indoors don't get access to this. So that's why, unfortunately, is our answer here, because the relationship is a shift from positive to absence, right? So here's good things that plants do. Unfortunately, people don't get access to that when they stay indoors because they're not next to plants. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, good. So then the next one is asking us about 11 to 14. So we'll quickly skim through the rest of the second paragraph just to make sure there's nothing that we're missing. So air that's not regularly detoxified can lead to a condition known as sick building syndrome. This disorder first came to light in the 1970s when many office workers in the US began to complain of unexplained flu-like symptoms. Researchers determined the cause to be volatile organic compounds. VOCs are harmful chemicals that are emitted by everyday objects like carpet, furniture, cleaning products, and computers. NASA Clean Air Study found a simple way to remove a significant number of VOCs within a 24-hour period. Add plants to indoor spaces. So again, we're kind of getting to the main idea of the passage, right? That there's all these problems with staying indoors, and a solution to that is adding indoor plants. Okay, so again, the question is asking me about a sentence after sentence 13. So I need to add a sentence here to make the point of this paragraph clear. So that's what I'm thinking about as I'm reading this third paragraph. So adding plants to indoor spaces has psychological benefits too. Research has long linked time spent in natural environments with increased energy and feelings of contentment. While being outdoors is an excellent option for improving a person's mental health, recent research has indicated that encountering natural elements while indoors can also help. To experience the maximum benefit of natural elements, experts suggest placing at least one live plant per 100 square feet of home or office space. So after sentence 13, we are saying that natural elements indoors can also help with mental health. So let's see which sentence can support that. So a global study of 7,600 workers from 16 countries revealed that employees who worked in spaces with natural elements, such as indoor plants, were more creative and productive than employees who worked in spaces without natural elements. So why am I underlining natural elements? Because that is exactly the language that they used here. So the same strategy as I taught you guys in reading comprehension, match the language of the passage to the answer choices. Right? So I'm already pretty comfortable with choice A because it's using that same language and because the study is supporting the idea in the third paragraph. And the main idea of the third paragraph is this, right? And it's in our topic sentence, the psychological benefits. And this study is a specific example of what those psychological benefits are, that creativity and that productivity. So whenever they ask you to support the ideas in the third paragraph, you find the main idea by looking at the topic sentence. Okay, let's go through the other choices to see what makes them not the best. So this is talking about a study suggests that one well-known hotel is popular among guests because its owners have made a significant investment in landscaping and indoor plants. So landscaping here is pretty random. That's the opposite, right? That's outdoor, and this whole section is on indoor plants. So it's not as good as the other one at all. It doesn't have any naturally flowing words like the other choice with natural elements repeating. And specifically is an okay transition word here. So I have nothing to say against that, but it's not relevant. The landscaping is completely irrelevant. It's an outside point. And it's also talking about like popularity of the hotel, which is also not an important point at all. So I would get rid of B. Next, looking at C, in fact, one recent study suggested that people who are routinely exposed to natural elements seem to increase their compassion for others, perhaps because that exposure generates compassion for the environment in which they live. Okay, so this choice is a harder one for us to eliminate, right? Because this choice does use natural elements, so it has that similar flow as the other sentence, but the problem is that this is not specific to them being indoors, right? So the point is that natural elements that are indoors. So that's why choice A is better, because they specifically say indoor plants and it's employees who work inside, right? Versus this one is just talking about natural elements in general. So this choice is one that we call too vague. But it's a good choice that could almost catch you because they're still using that same language, but it's too vague. It's not specific enough to the fact that those natural elements have to be indoors. So that's why I would eliminate C. And then finally, looking at D, according to a study that was conducted in 2003, plants can reduce the amount of noise that people perceive in indoor spaces with hard surfaces, just as adding a carpet can make the room seem quieter. So this one is talking about indoor spaces, but it misses the other point. It doesn't talk about anything in the topic sentence. It doesn't talk about any of the psychological benefits. So the room being quieter has not much, like nothing specifically to do with like mental health or psychological benefits. So noise cancellation, although convenient and is a positive thing, is irrelevant to this topic of psychological benefits. So that's why we would get rid of D. Okay, do you guys have any questions on 6 or 7? All right, so let's do these two. So which sentence presents ideas irrelevant to the topic of the passage and should be deleted? So this one will always be a question. They like to ask this, which of the following is irrelevant? So sentence 11 is one that we read already, and I can tell you right away that sentence 11 is relevant because it's the topic sentence of paragraph 3, and we just used it over and over again to justify our answer for 7. So right away, I can get rid of this. And the reason would be is because it's the topic sentence of paragraph 3. So we're already picking between 14, 15, 16. And again, for 14, it's again less likely to be irrelevant because we already read that. It has that same theme of natural elements, and it's specific to having a maximum benefit. It's giving us a specific fact, which is still relevant to paragraph 3. So I would get rid of this as well. So really, we're picking between 15 and 16. So we're now reading the conclusion paragraph. So connecting with nature, even just by being near an indoor plant, is a significant factor in a person's well-being. So this seems pretty relevant, right? Because the whole passage is about indoor plants and how they're positive. So we're talking about well-being. Sitting in front of an electronic screen all day isn't natural, and today's workers need to get up and get outdoors. Now, this is clearly irrelevant, right? Because the passage isn't about getting outdoors. It's more about bringing the outdoors inside. It's more for indoor plants. So getting outdoors is not a message of this passage. So we know that our answer here is 16, and we can justify it by getting outdoors is not a theme of this passage. And then the last question here is saying, what concluding sentence, how should we end this passage after sentence 17? So let's go ahead and read our last sentence, sentence 17, and think about how we should conclude the passage. So Richard Ryan, a psychology professor at the University of Rochester, puts it this way: nature is something within which we flourish, so having it be more a part of our lives is critical, especially when we live and work in built environments. So at the end of these kinds of paragraphs, usually what they do is they want a call to action, or they want to talk about the lesson that you learned, right? Like conclusion will be somewhat of a summary, a lesson, and a call to action. So that's what we're going to look for in one of these options. Do not pick any choice that introduces new information So that would never be at the end of your passage. That would never be at the very end. Your last sentence would never be introducing a brand new idea. And do not pick a choice that describes a detail. Because again, when you finish, you don't want to be finishing on a very specific detail type of note. You want to be finishing, restating your main idea or calling to action. So let's look through the options. So because indoor plants absorb carbon dioxide in our air and release the oxygen we need to breathe, they are vital to our wholeness and wellness. Okay, so let's think about it. So first of all, bringing up carbon dioxide in our air and release, this seems awfully like detail, right? It's a little bit too specific. And the way that we talked about reading comprehension, they are vital to our wholeness and well-being, although this is generally bringing them up positively, right? Plants positively, which is the overarching theme of this passage. I think that this is a little bit too much. It's bringing a little bit too much attention and it's a little bit too extreme with the vital and we need. So this choice, just the wording is a little bit too extreme and the beginning is too specific for me. So that helps me eliminate A. Okay, next, experts say that adding a Boston fern, a spider plant, or an aloe vera is a good place to start if you want to begin to incorporate nature into your home or office. Okay, so what do you guys think I'm going to say is wrong with choice B? What's the problem with choice B? Yeah, new info and too detailed. Anywhere in the passage that they tell us about these specific plants? No. And does it matter which specific plants? Did anywhere in their passage they tell us that a specific type of plant matters? No. So this is a choice that we're definitely not picking because it's new info and it's also way too specific. Okay, now choice C. More people should consider bringing natural elements inside to improve general wellness and reverse some of the negative effects of an indoor society. So what are some things, what do you guys think about choice C? It's good, right? What do we like about it? It's general, there's no new information. And how about the word choice? Should consider, right? Consider it. Maybe bring natural elements, maybe not. How about this? Reverse some of the negative effects, not reverse all possible effects. So this is a comfortable, it's an open, it's a wishy-washy choice. It's relevant to the passage. It's using these same themes about natural elements that we've seen in like 3 questions already. And overall, it's still positive, which we got out of this passage. Improve general wellness, right? That's a very positive thing. So that's all the things that make choice C a good answer choice. And then finally, choice D, as one study has confirmed, houseplants are a wise investment because they can remove, yeah, this is way too specific again. And it's new information. So that's what makes this a bad choice, and we'll put a nice X through it as well. So now just don't forget that we left question 5 blank. So let's just go back to this. So I don't even need to go back, right? Because we know the topic of the passage at this point after reviewing it so deeply. So let's read through the options. So placing plants in homes and offices can provide a healthy bridge between nature and indoors. So again, I love this choice because it's talking about placing plants in homes and offices, which is the topic, right? That's the whole title about indoor plants. So we're covering that. Then we have a nice soft word, can, not must provide, not always provide, can, a nice soft word, and between nature and the indoors, which is absolutely true. The answer here is A. Now, what's wrong with the other options? Choice B, it is important for people to realize that they need to spend more time near plants, whether indoors or out in nature. So 2 problems. Need, I think, is too extreme. And same thing here, people need too extreme. And they never talk about spending time outdoors in the passage. So that's a new idea that's not mentioned anywhere. And same thing here. It's not about time outdoors, it's just about indoor plants. So don't conflate the two. So that's what makes B and C not good answers. And then finally, individuals with little connection to nature can experience illness, depression, and higher levels of stress. So although this is true according to the passage, it's largely negative, and this is way too broad. So little connection to nature, how? Again, is it just time outdoors? It's too broad. It doesn't introduce the topic of this passage specifically, which is just about indoor plants, not about connection to nature as a whole. So this is way too broad. So we would eliminate choice D. All right, guys, so we got through the entire grammar section of this test. So I'm going to go back to our beginning page and check this one off as well. So we completed our goals. We still have 15 minutes left. So I'll let you guys decide. Do you guys have any specific grammar type questions that you want me to cover? Or if not, I can quickly talk to you guys about poems because it's part of reading comprehension, but we didn't really get a chance to do that on reading day. Poems? Okay, let's do poem strategies real quick for 15 minutes, and then I will let you guys go. Okay, good. So a lot of you guys are saying poems. Okay, so let's do poems. Okay, so for poems, there's a few things that we want to think about. So we want to think about comprehending poems, and we also want to think about like structure and rhythm of poems, which can help us with comprehension. So let's start with comprehending and interpreting poems, and then we'll do structure and rhythm. So a lot of this is pretty similar to reading comprehension, but at the same time different because poems are their own can of worms and poems are very not literary. But the first thing that I usually do with poems is the same thing that I do with passages. So the first thing that I do is I read the title of the poem. So oftentimes the title of the poem will give me the topic. Or at least it will introduce me to what I'm going to be reading about. So it can kind of set my brain into the right direction. Now, other things that help us understand a poem is the point of view. So the trick for point of view is to look at the pronouns. So if you notice first person pronouns, that means it's a personal story. So that means that the narrator is telling you their story through their poetry. So if you see first person, so you see pronouns like I, me, my, we, us. So that tells us that this is a personal story. Versus if you see third person pronouns, so that's like he, she, they. So that more tells us that this is third person. It's somebody's outside story, so it's not personal. So all of that can kind of set the scene about how the poem is being structured, who is telling you the story, helps you understand what the story really is about. Now, the next thing with poems that is huge, that we can do a whole webinar on it of itself, but I'll just cover it briefly here because we're already winding down for the night, is literary devices. So literary devices are huge. They're definitely going to be used in poetry on this exam. So let's talk about a few literary devices. Which are some common ones that you guys know? Yeah, you guys already are answering my questions before I ask. So tell me what the device is and what it means. So what is a simile? So a simile is a comparison using like or as. A metaphor is a comparison without that. What else do we know? What other literary devices? What about imagery? What's imagery and why would it be used in a poem? So imagery is sensory language. And the main thing that you guys need to know is that it appeals to your senses. So you guys should think about how something looks, how it smells, how it tastes, how it feels. So oftentimes, the reason I'm teaching you guys this is not, again, I don't care if you know what a simile is or what a metaphor is. It's more important that you guys know how the questions will be asked. So they'll say, what is the purpose of using this simile here? Or what is the purpose of using this? And you guys should be able to say that this is imagery, and the purpose is to appeal to the reader's senses. And the bigger purpose is to make the reader feel like they're there, like they're experiencing it, like they're seeing it, like they're smelling it, like they're tasting it. Because that's what poetry is all about. It's about making you as the reader feel like you're kind of immersed in that story, like you're experiencing it with the author. So that's kind of how I want you guys to think about these literary devices. A few more that I want to talk about. One is personification. So this is giving human qualities to things that are not human. So most commonly, this is done to forces of nature. So this is very commonly done. I see this all the time in poems on the SHSAT. So they'll personify like the wind or a storm or a hurricane. So whenever you guys notice that, you'll know what they're testing you on. So with forces of nature, they're giving human-like qualities. That's going to be the answer. Who knows what a hyperbole is? Hyperbole is an exaggeration. And the purpose of this, authors use this to signify, to highlight or emphasize something. So authors use this for emphasis. Then we have alliteration. What is alliteration? Yeah, repeating sounds. Yep, words with the same beginning letters. Okay, who knows what onomatopoeia is? Yeah, it's a sound word. So it's a word that's the sound sounds like what it's named after. So for example, like sizzle sounds like that literal feeling of like food sizzling on a pan. And again, my most important thing for you guys to take away from this is not so much what these devices are, but why an author would use them in a poem. That's what's most important for you guys to take away from this lesson right now. And then the last thing with poetry that I want to briefly talk about before we finish for the night is structure of poems. So regarding poem structure, and I guess rhythm can go into this as well, is kind of what a poem looks like. So you should think about the general shape of a poem. And that can help you with understanding what it's about. So sometimes poems just look like this, and then like this, and then like this. So in that case, we have stanzas, and you should ask yourselves, what's the relationship, right? Like, why does the author choose to do 3 lines and then take a break, 3 lines and then take a break? Because nothing is done by accident in poems. The poem can also look like a specific shape. So there's a very famous poem about a snake, and it quite literally like looks like a snake, like it's in this S formation that keeps going. So again, that can tell you about a poem. Sometimes a poem will start out, the lines will start out very broad, and then it'll narrow, and then it'll get wide again. And it's based on the way that the story is flowing. So the general shape of the poem can help supplement your understanding of the poem. So other things to pay attention to in poetry is if there's any rhyming schemes, and if there's any breaks in the pattern. That's what's the most important thing. So every second word rhymes, and then in the last stanza that stops. So pay attention to breaks and patterns in poetry. And try to connect the events of what's going on to that break and pattern. Other things that can help you in a poem is capitalization. So normally we capitalize names of people, names of places, right? Those are called proper nouns. But sometimes in a poem, you'll notice that they're capitalizing improper nouns. So words that don't need to be capitalized. So notice that sometimes they'll capitalize mother, sometimes they'll capitalize natural elements like sun, or a garden, or a chair. So again, the key is, why are they doing that? So usually they're doing that for some sort of emphasis, or because of personification, or due to like a respect thing. So that's another thing that you want to pay attention to. And then finally, pay attention to punctuation. So notice if there's any random commas, any random periods in the middle, any random capitalizations. So any form of punctuation on the SHSAT poem is signifying some sort of break or some sort of pause. The author wants you to pause as you're reading it. So think about why that would be. And finally, things like italics, things like bolding. All of these can be used for emphasizing different things as well. All right, guys, so we've gotten through a grammar review. We've gotten through the entire grammar section from this exam, and we even got to talk briefly about poem strategies. So this kind of marks the end of our 3rd day of grammar series, and I'll add that here as well, that we did bonus poems.
Olga, you can open the chat so everyone can type a huge thank you. You deserve a big thank you, because oh my goodness, that was a lot in 3 days. All right,
Yes,
so let's
thank you guys for joining. I hope that you all learned a lot.
I want to take a moment to, so I'm going to say thank you. Jacob, say thank you. Thank you, Olga.
Thank you, Olga.
You're the best.
You're back.
All right, so we're going to say thank you because that was a lot of information. Oh, look at how many thank yous you're getting. Everyone, let's take a moment also. I'm going to take all of you off mute. So let me get to that right now and do that as well. Just one moment. Okay, ready? I am going to count to 3 and we're going to say thank you. Ready? Let's see who can say thank you 10 times in a row. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Say
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bacon, egg, and cheese.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Spasiba. Gracias. Everything. Shay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Olga, thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you for your
Amazing job,
participation. You
as
guys were great in
always.
the chat.
You did a lot. Is there anything we haven't covered? We covered everything. Is there anything we're missing? What else do we need? We're doing stress reductions next week. What else is there?
I think we really covered it all. So you guys should
covered
be in good
everything,
hands. You
right?
should be rewriting these notes, redoing these practice exams. Good luck, guys.
Yeah, I know. Guys, we're really proud of you.
Mommy, eat this.
Okay, go over there. All right, we're going to say good luck to everyone. We covered all 3 big areas. We also ran that poetry webinar as well. We covered a lot of grounds. I love the rainbow. I really like the colors. They bring me joy. All right, so we're set. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys. Say bye, Jacob.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. You did a wonderful job. Oh, look at all these nice thank yous we got.
I know. Thank you
That's
guys so much. I
nice.
appreciate you.
Oh, look at that. We appreciate you too. Thank you. I didn't expect to learn so much poetry in 10 minutes at the very end of the webinar. So I have to say that was quite a pleasant surprise. Okay. Thank you, Olga. Thank you for teaching from the hearts. Okay. You're doing a great job. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Everyone,
Guys,
we
good night.
are going to tell you that it is 9, just about 9 o'clock. That's it. We're signing out. Jacob, say
Good
bye.
night.
Bye.
Okay, bye everyone. Thank you. Bye everybody.